The conceptual framework of macroevolution and microevolution. What is the difference between macroevolution and microevolution? According to Wikipedia, macroevolution is evolution on a scale at or above the level of species, in contrast with microevolution, which refers to smaller evolutionary changes of allele frequencies within a species or population. But then the article correctly points out that macroevolution and microevolution describe fundamentally identical processes on different timescales. This begs the following questions. Why is it useful to make this distinction, and how and why did this distinction arise in evolutionary theory in the first place? Macroevolution refers to changes that occur on a geological timescale. For Darwin, this would have included the significant changes in the shape and form of organisms that served to adapt them to various niches or ways of life, such as the wings of birds, bats, or insects, or the legs of iguanas, tigers, or human beings. This implies that microevolution for Darwin would be concerned with incremental changes that take place by means of accumulated variation and selection. It follows that for the modern synthesis, as noted by Ernst Mayr, transspecific evolution is nothing but an extrapolation and magnification of the events that take place within populations and species. This is the reason that the Wikipedia article states that microevolution refers to smaller evolutionary changes of allele frequencies within a species or population, as noted previously. In other words, in this view, microevolution describes the mechanism of natural selection as seen through the eyes of proponents of the modern synthesis. But Mayr also correctly points out that it is misleading to make a distinction between the causes of micro and macroevolution. In other words, microevolutionary changes are the combined and visible results of microevolutionary changes over longer periods of time. A 21st century view of the limitations of the macro versus microevolution distinction. In 19th and 20th century evolutionary biology, the common ancestry of diverse shapes and forms can be seen by comparing their morphologies, their visible shape and form, and the way that structure gives rise to function. But it is one thing to look at the final phenotype of an organism, and quite another to understand the molecular, cellular, and developmental mechanisms that actually generate complex structures from multitudes of specialized cooperating cells. The diverse shape and forms of animals, their macroevolutionary adaptations, result from long periods of microevolutionary changes. From Darwin's 19th century point of view, macroevolution was the result of accumulated incremental changes brought about by means of natural selection. From the 20th century point of view of proponents of the modern synthesis, macroevolution was the result of changing frequencies of alleles in natural populations. Later, with the discovery of DNA and the genetic code, macroevolution was the result of mutations in protein-coding genes. From a 21st century perspective, however, the problem with all of these points of view is that they do not adequately describe the actual molecular, cellular, and developmental mechanisms by which shape and form are now known to arise. In each generation, accumulated genetic information is translated into the complex organization of each multicellular individual. Many different mechanisms that involve the inner workings and complex interactions of cells during development contribute to this complex organization. What evolves is the genetic information that drives the process of development and leads to species-specific outcomes.